Welcome to Jumpstart Your Joy, a podcast that looks at the inspiration, intention, and actionable steps to help you jumpstart joy in the world, in your life, and in other people's lives. This is your host, Paula Jenkins. Welcome to episode 204. In this week's show, I'm revisiting the conversation that I had with Kelly Denithorne. Kelly is an educator, a transgender advocate, and the blogger behind Unordinary Style. Kelly started this blog in 2010 and began it as a place to explore her love of style while she was exploring women's fashion. Now, Kelly had been born male, and she was trying on several different titles for herself, including transvestite and crossdresser, and then realized that she was born with gender variants, and she is transgendered. In the 2018 school year, Kelly then began teaching her middle school classroom as a woman, and she has started the process of transitioning. The thing that I love about Kelly and this episode is the humor and grace with which she shares her journey. In the last year or so, she's also become an advocate for the transgender community and has had several speaking engagements where she gets to share her story as well. It's really been a unique experience having gone to high school with Kelly when she was known as Bob, and it was a real, true joy to reconnect with her and learn about where her life has taken her since then. The other reason that I really wanted to do this as a look back episode as I wrap up season 4 is it felt like there was such a strong resonance with a message that you guys heard last week from Stacia Savasic, who is a style coach, and she talks about inside out congruency and what she's learned from her own daughter about that. And then Kelly's story about how her journey of fashion also helped her connect to her true identity as a woman. And so it really was a beautiful, happenstance that these two episodes were in this season, but kind of like I saw in season 3 with some of the episodes starting to resonate around the same topics. I felt like these two were so beautiful together, and I really wanted to share them as such here as we wind down on season 4. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with Kelly. So before we get to that, a real quick hello and introduction. I'm Paula, and welcome to Jumpstart Your Joy. It's a podcast that talks about the inspiration, intention, and action that you can take to bring more joy into your daily life. It's a real treat to get to do this show every week. I'm so totally delighted to be here. So thank you so much for listening. If you want to find out more about the show, you can find the website at jumpstartyourjoy.com, and the show notes, which will have links to Kelly's website, and some of the things that we talk about are at jumpstartyourjoy.com/Kelly. And I encourage you to head on over there. You can also sign up for my 3 Things Thursday newsletter. And that's where I talk a little bit more about the things that really stood out to me about each of these episodes. So it's a really fun way to engage with you guys. I'm also super excited to announce that I am one of the speakers at She Podcasts Live, which is a conference for podcasters, and it's running in October in Atlanta. So if you want to find out more, I will have a little link in the show notes about it, and you can click on that if you're a podcaster, or if you're going, I would love to see you. So let me know if you will be there, or there are still tickets available if you're interested. So without further ado, let's get right on into this conversation with Kelly Denithorne. Welcome to Jumpstart Your Joy, Kelly.
Oh, thank you so much for having me here. I'm so happy to be here.
It's a delight. It is really a delight to have
you. It is a delight to have me. Thank you for saying that. I agree entirely.
This is going to be so much fun. Would you like to tell us what you loved most as a child or in school? What were your earliest sparks of joy?
My earliest sparks of joy came from being with my sister. I can remember that for, the longest time. That's probably my longest memory of just how enjoyable it was hanging out with my sister. I don't think it was very enjoyable for my sister. She's an older sister, about 2.5 years. And so I'm sure I was a complete and utter pest to her, but I was always thrilled and happy whenever I could be around her.
Aww.
Yeah.
Would you like to share what it is that you do now, and who do you work with?
I do a variety of different things. My main 9-to-5 job is I'm a middle school math teacher. in Porterville, California. So I work for Porterville Unified School District. It's very exciting, very exciting school district. Now, it's a very lovely place to work. That's one of my jobs. I also am an outside math consultant. And so I work with a company to go into school districts to help elementary teachers to better teach mathematics. So sometimes for them, I operate as a teacher coach where I'll work one-on-one with teachers. And sometimes I work with them as a presenter where we go in and do presentations to larger groups of teachers. Yeah. And I do lots of little side gigs. And so I blog, which is a very exciting, very well-paid position. It's oh my God, it's amazing the perks that you get from being a fashion blogger. Oh goodness. Yeah. And I also do little things like, do something that's called Teachers Pays Teachers. So if you go to Teachers Pays Teachers, then you can find my very own teacher work there, and you can buy it, or you can have some of it for free.
That's cool. So are those like lesson plans that someone could download or use?
They're more like lesson activities, mathematics activities that I designed for use in my own classroom. So I designed my own curriculum for use with my students to help them to better understand mathematics. And then I can put it onto the site. And then if it's like something small, I typically put it up there for free. Mm-hmm. But if I put some time into it, then I have a nominal fee.
Very cool.
Oh, yeah. Very exciting. Everybody loves middle school math, right? I mean, come on. It's like the favorite times of our lives. Middle school and mathematics. Oh, my God.
It was not my favorite. I hated math. I didn't really like middle school. So, yeah, you would have been a joy to have spent time with because, yeah, I'm the one that would have been crying in the corner.
I'm sure you would be great in my math class.
I probably would have been, yeah. Over the last year or so, you've made some pretty big changes.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about how that's impacted your life and your day job and all of it? Because I think it's a super inspiring story.
Oh, thanks so much. Well, within the last year, specifically the last year, I decided to transition. And so involved in that was going ahead and legally changing my name and my gender, which I got completed on June 28th of 2018. And I think that it cost me about $480, $500. I get to go ahead and change my name and my gender. Yeah, but no, it was a super process. But then the question really was, what about the children? What am I going to do as a teacher? Because I had left my job the year before and I had started coming out as transgender prior to legally changing. And so people at my job, they knew. And so they're like, so what's going to happen next year? What are you going to have the students do? And I said, you know what? I don't know. I really don't. However, once I went ahead and actually legally changed my name and my gender, I decided, I'm going to go into work as me. And the students are going to call me Mrs. Denithorne. My wife actually works at the same school site that I do. So I teach mathematics and she teaches language arts. And so we had the debate for a while. We're like, oh my God, there's going to be 2 Mrs. Denithornes on campus. What will the students do? What will happen?
Amazing.
But we decided, you know what? They're going to figure it out. They're going to roll with it and they're going to be cool. And they really have been. I've had students last year as 7th graders that had me as Mr. Denithorne. And this year, some of them have me again, and they all are totally fine with referencing me as Mrs. Denithorne. And like within the first month or two, several students, they would misgender me through pronoun usage or something. And then like a student next to them would smack them on the arm and be like, she uses she and her. Come on, get with it. What are you doing? And so that was just hilarious to see the students correcting each other that way. So the students have been great.
It seems like it's been overwhelmingly positive. And I don't know, was there anything about the transitioning of name and gender that surprised you with the students?
It kind of surprised me with like how well they went with it. And as well, like that it's better now. Things are better in my classroom. I've always struggled with discipline in my classroom. And I've had a tough time with that, with making sure that I remain emotionally stable. And so transitioning has really tremendously helped me in that manner. But surprisingly, it helped my students as well, because I think that middle schoolers are really good BS detectors.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so they can like kind of read when you're not being honest with them and such. They can kind of tell. And so probably the last 5-10 years, I went into work in a very mixed gender format. And so I wore women's jewelry and had a woman's phone case and a wallet, and my fingernails were painted pretty much every day. But I wasn't like out as trans. And so when I did choose to transition, it's kind of like the students were like, oh, now I get it. Now I understand. And so it's really helped build good relationships with the students. And so discipline issues in my classroom have really seemed to disappear in many ways. And so since I'm a lot more calm and self-assured in who I am and not terrified of being persecuted for who I am, it's just lovely now in my classroom. After 23 years, I'm like, oh my God, I actually like teaching.
Well, and that is amazing. And I know you have an amazing blog post that went up today as of when we're recording this, but about some of that journey. And maybe this is a great time to kind of bring in your blog and how it is so tied in. It's called Unordinary Style, which I love the name of. So good.
Thank you.
It strikes me that style is a very interesting thing about how it kind of reflects who we are in many ways. And
it
so
does.
I wonder if you want to talk a little bit about how your journey has unfolded and how that blog has played a role in it.
Yeah, it was really interesting when I first started my blog because I, at the time, I was referencing myself as a transvestite of all things. And transvestite nowadays in the trans community, it's like, that's like a dirty word. You don't say that. You don't call yourself a transvestite because a transvestite is somebody that is in it for sexual purposes.
Okay.
However, I didn't know that. I mean, growing up, I probably knew the two words transvestite and transsexual, but I did not connect those words with me. Those words were describing somebody that was a character in a movie, Dr. Frankenfurter. From, I can't even think of it.
Is that Rocky? Rocky Horror?
Rocky Horror Picture Show. There you go. And I definitely did not identify as that. When I finally accepted that something was going on with me, I kind of had this idea that like all I really wanted to do was just dress in women's clothes and express my own personal style that way. And so I started calling myself a transvestite. And I was fine with that. And I was living in my own little world. And I was totally cool with that. My wife knew. She's always known. But then I decided to reach out to the wider community. And so I went to Google and I typed in transvestite. And I was like, oh my God, what are these images that are coming back to me? This is not me,
Right.
And so I wanted to put out there a different image of what a transvestite could be. And so when I started blogging, it was to show that you could call yourself a transvestite and you could actually be stylish and just dress like, any other average, normal woman. And so that's when I started my blog. But that was 10 years ago that I've been blogging. And over that time period, I stopped calling myself a transvestite. I started calling myself a crossdresser. For a while. And that's when I started coming out more to more people. I was like, I can't tell people that I'm a transvestite because they're going to get this image of just this super sexualized person. And there is something that is called transvestic fetishism. And so it is a sexual fetish and it is tied to dressing in the ways of the opposite gender from you. So when I started calling myself a crossdresser, and all this is still on my blog. So like some people, they're like, no, I've decided that I'm not this anymore. So they go back and they change all this stuff. But I was like, you know what? That's who I was at that time.
Yeah.
And that's how I identified. So I'm going to keep it up there and it's fine.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that
thanks.
you leave it there. I have the same opinion of the podcast. There's an interesting story to see how someone becomes who they are, whatever that journey is. And so I love that you've left them all up there because I think it is an interesting, it's who you were and it reflects also a journey that probably somebody else will see themselves reflected in some way in the future.
Yeah.
Of figuring out who they are and holistically, what does that mean? After you had discovered that maybe crossdresser was a term that you kind of resonated with more, how did you go from knowing that you enjoyed wearing women's clothes to then knowing that you wanted to transition?
Well, it's been a really, really hard thing for me to accept. And so, gosh, I would say that in between calling myself a crossdresser and transitioning,
there's a lot of territory there.
It's probably 8 years.
Yeah.
In between those time periods. I know for a fact that I have a reference that I call myself a crossdresser because I came out to some friends in 2012 as a crossdresser. And it was probably 6 years later that I started coming out to people as transgender non-binary. So when I was a crossdresser, I really had this idea that said, you know what, I'm a dude. Okay, that's what I am. I'm a dude. I was born with dude parts. So I may as well just accept that I'm a dude, regardless of how I feel inside and regardless of everything that I like. I just need to accept this is reality. And so I tried really, really hard to just accept that reality and to kind of satisfy myself. I mean, I hate using that because, again, like we were just talking about sex, right? So I satisfy myself. No.
Not that kind of satisfaction.
No, it's just sort of like, I don't know. It's just like an internal feeling, like a need, like I need to do this to feel right with the world. When I was cross-dressing and such, then I would only go ahead and dress as me, dress as a woman, maybe once or twice a month.
Oh, wow.
And so it'd be, a Saturday where I didn't have anything going on. And so then, I would get dressed up in female clothes, and my wife and I would go to a nearby town and go to the movies, or we'd go to Costco or Trader Jo's, these very exciting things. So I go to this speech and I tell people, I'm like, oh yeah, we went clubbing all the time and everything. No,
no,
no, just shopping. Okay. Just these average everyday things. And so that went on for quite a long time and I was really debating like whether or not I should try to change my hormones. Because I was really unhappy in many ways. And in many ways, I've been successful throughout my life, but there's always been something kind of stopping me from truly being successful and how I felt being successful. And same thing with teaching, that I've always been a good teacher, but I've always struggled to be a teacher and such. And so I debated changing my hormones for a long time. And I came to the decision that, nope, I'm not going to change my hormones. And with me, it's really strange how I do things because I have a way of like figuring out how to do things, even though I consciously made a decision to not do that.
Yeah. It's like your subconscious self is coming in and being like, oh, no, Kelly, let's do it this way. Yeah, and you're like, I'm foiled again.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it was so weird. I went ahead and I made a presentation to give to college classes. It's one of the things I like to do now is I go out to college classes and speak to them. And so I made this presentation of like basically my whole life from like the day I was born until now. And while making that, I realized I spent 90% of my nights in the women's dorm at college.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I was like, oh my God. It's not like because I went to them, I was like, hi, I'm trans. I'm actually a woman. So I need to be in the women's dorms. No. I just told my girlfriend and we went to college together. And I just said to her, I really don't like my roommate. So can I just sleep here? Yeah. And then her roommate allowed it. And so I stayed in the women's dorm. Yeah. So the same sort of thing. Like I decided to not change my hormones. However, what I did do is I went to my doctor and I told my doctor that I had a prostate problem and complained about very specific symptoms of an enlarged prostate. And so they put me through every single test, and I'm not even going to describe them because they were actually horrible. And say this, and most guys are like, oh yeah, there's no way I would let anybody put a finger anywhere. And it's like, you know what? That was the easiest of all of the tests that I had,
Oh,
so
man.
Yeah, they were bad. And so the doctor got done. This was a urologist, a specialist who does this stuff all the time. He got done and he said, guess what? I can't find anything wrong with you. And I said, yeah, but I still have these symptoms. And he said, okay, well, I'll put you on this medication. I took the medication. The medication worked fine. I went into the doctor and I told the doctor, nope, didn't work at all. But what you could do is that you could prescribe me finasteride. And he said, oh, okay, well, finasteride. Yeah, that'll help. That'll shrink your prostate. But you do know that finasteride has the potential side effect of breast growth, don't you? And I said, oh, no, really? I had no idea. So
Kelly, that's wonderful.
So, he put me on finasteride, and I was just pleased as punch. I decided to not change my hormones, and I got a doctor to put me on a prescription that might potentially cause me to have breast growth. Mm-hmm. And so everything was great until 3 months later when I went in and he said, how's it going? And I wanted him to know that it was great because, I really wanted to stay on this. I hadn't had any breast growth, but I wanted him to know that this is awesome for me. So I told him, this is great. This is fabulous. It's working really, really well. And he said, oh my gosh, great. Then we're going to take you off of it because it's done its job. Mm. And I had a panic attack. I really don't remember anything else that the doctor went ahead and said to me. I do remember making it back to my car and crying all the way back to my work and just trying to pull myself together because I had a class that I had to teach after that. And it was like right there in my car when I just couldn't stop crying. And I knew I had to seek therapy. I had to finally go ahead and seek therapy for my gender variance. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know if transition was the right thing. I didn't know if changing my hormones was the right thing. But I knew that I finally needed to get some help. And I've been aware of my gender variance probably since at least age 12. At least age 12, I've been really quite clear that there is something different about me. And so at age 45, I finally got therapy and I started seeing somebody who specializes in gender variance. And she very quickly heard my story and was like, hey, maybe you should call this doctor. And so I called that doctor and I got an appointment and I went in and talked to the doctor. And the doctor heard like 5 minutes of my story and was like, yeah, here's your prescription for estrogen. You really need this.
How amazing to find the right people when you were ready for those people and needed them, that they showed up and they were the right ones. Like, oh yeah. I mean, what a blessing, really.
It really, really has been. I've been so blessed to go ahead into work. Like, it's like, we call it like assembling a team, right? When you have like these conditions. And so my team has just been awesome. I've just been so fortunate to work with these people. So I got my script for estrogen and I got a testosterone blocker. And because you have to block the testosterone, it doesn't stop the production. It just stops my body from absorbing it. By the end of the first day, I was like, oh yeah, this is what's been missing from my life pretty much the entire time.
And you knew that quickly. That's amazing.
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah. It was so obvious to me. Just so obvious. I didn't have any intentions of transitioning at that point. I just knew that I wanted to change my hormones. That was in 2017 that actually happened. And so it wasn't until a year later that I actually decided to legally change my gender and then actually start dressing as me, which was another fabulous decision that I went with.
Well, and before we go into that part, if somebody is maybe in that space, either right before you had that moment in the car, or they've had that inkling since they were 12, or like, they're in that space of kind of feeling like maybe there's something going on here and I'm not sure what it is. I don't know. Do you have advice?
Get a therapist. That's it. Get not just any therapist, get a therapist that is at least familiar and works with the trans community or gender variant individuals. Ideally, you should get somebody that specializes, in gender variance. That really is my best advice. And I really wish that I would have had access to such a person long ago.
Yeah. Well, and I imagine most people there's somebody probably out there that you could find if you just look, knowing what to look for and just saying yes to it is like, is the step in itself.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it is. I mean, it's just, yeah, it's huge. That was my issue for the longest time. That I was like, oh, I'm not sure. So I don't need it. And it's like, I used to be so like kind of against therapy and such. I'm like, look, if you got somebody to talk to, if you got friends, you're good to go.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, no, I'm probably going to go ahead and be in therapy for the rest of my life just because I love working with my therapist. And I love working with somebody that I can set goals with and kind of work towards those things and such.
Well, and I think there's something to be, I'm not currently working with a therapist, but I have in the past, and there's some things in life where you're not going to get that kind of support or that kind of guidance from someone else. Like you just kind of need that specialized care of someone that can really help you out. And mine was around PTSD and stuff. But I think figuring that out and saying yes, I think that was one of the scariest things for me ever, was saying, oh my gosh, I need this help. And then finding the right person.
That's so hard.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you're right too. Finding the right person, finding that person that you can work with. That's a struggle in of itself.
Yeah. And it's a huge trust thing. And then
It
when
is.
it works, it's amazing. So yeah.
Yeah, it is. I just realized as we're chatting here that like you asked about the blog and how the blog helped in this. And I think really, to kind of try to wrap up that thought was that the blog helped me because I was able to document my thoughts. It's like an online diary.
Yeah.
It very much so is. And so it gave me that place to kind of document these things and kind of work out my thoughts, as well as bounce ideas off of other people and kind of do that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I don't remember how long ago you asked that question about the blog, but I was like, oh crap, I don't think I like actually returned to that.
Did you find community in some ways through the blog, or have you found a community of transgendered people?
I have connected with a variety of different communities. There is a community of transgender people within the blogosphere. My favorite thing is connecting with cisgender people through the blog and getting feedback and comments from cisgender people on my blog. I'm like, oh my God, somebody that's not trans reads my blog. One reader recently that wrote me some really cool letter. She's like not trans and she is also a teacher, and my blog has helped educate her about trans people. And I'm like, oh my God, that's really, really cool. There is a bit of a trans community in the blogosphere, and I do connect with them here and there, but the blogging community tends to be very sporadic, especially in the trans community. It's like same thing with my blog in many ways, that it's like lots and lots of blogs, and then we transition and they're like, oh, blog not so important to us anymore.
Yeah.
And so I still blog here and there. But then like chat boards, there are several chat boards that I am a member of, and those are very interesting to interact with a wider transgender community. And so it might be a good time to explain as well that many people consider the word transgender to be an umbrella term.
Okay.
That many different gender variances reside underneath the transgender umbrella.
Okay.
And so, like, there's one particular chat board that I go to, and there are people that are there that call themselves transvestites, and people that call themselves crossdressers, and people that call themselves transsexual, and people that call themselves non-binary. And so that's a really interesting community to interact with, to be able to get a wider view of the transgender community, which is cool. And there's a local place to me, in Visalia, that it's a place called The Source. And they do like every other week, support group for transgender individuals. And so we go for like 2 hours and can go ahead and chat about anything. And a wide variety of people with different identities show up there. And so that's been really cool to connect with them, to connect with people face to face. Because online, oftentimes you don't know, is this a real person? Are they being honest and forthright with who they are, or what?
Yeah.
And a lot of times, unfortunately, in the trans community, there can be a lot of fantasy play within there. So people don't transition, but then online, then they say that they have transitions. And so they put themselves off as something that they're not. And so that's kind of, I don't know, you always got to be careful, right? You got to be careful online.
Oh, totally.
So it's really cool to interact with people in public. And that's also given me a lot more opportunities and open doors for me to be able to go speak in different places. I was, through my connection to this place in Visalia, then I spoke this year at the Women's March.
Around that kind of work, has that been you more stepping into an advocacy role? I mean, and I deeply appreciate that you're open and explaining some of these things in language that I can understand and that other people can then understand and communicate to other people as well. So yeah. What brought you into that space of advocacy and speaking about your experience? Probably
on, I don't know, more than one occasion, my doctor and my therapist, both completely independently, said to me, so when are you going to get out there and start speaking to people? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And they're like, you are a fabulous role model for the trans community, and you're very approachable. I was like, what? I'm approachable? No, I'm not. I am not approachable. I'm a total bitch. What are you talking about?
You're approachable, Kelly. I'm sorry. They're right.
Well, what I went ahead and started trying to do was try to try to explore this idea. Like, what would this mean? And as well, I met somebody through my therapist. She also ran a group support thingy. And in that group support, she brought in a speaker whose name is Jessica Lynn. And Jessica Lynn is a trans woman who started speaking in Santa Maria, little town here in California. And she is now traveling worldwide and giving her transgender speech, about what her story is. And so she probably, I think in the last year, she's probably done her speech maybe at 300 different venues.
That's mind-blowing. That's a lot of talking. Yeah.
It really is. There was a reporter from New York that was speculating that she's probably the world's most prolific public speaker, probably does the most public speeches, worldwide.
Yeah. Well, and for people who don't know Santa Maria, it's a tiny town, like kind of in central California. And it's not that close to either LA or San Diego or San Francisco. It's kind of out on its own. So that's an unusual place for any speaker to come from.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Very much so. And so anyway, she came to group and she was like, look, we need more trans individuals getting out there and speaking. Mm-hmm. And so it was just, the right time, the right place. And I heard that and I was like, okay, I need to do this. And so then I set up with my therapist a goal that said, how am I going to go about doing this? That, would help me to figure this out. Mm-hmm. And so it probably took me about a year before I figured things out and got my little presentation together and started putting out inquiry letters to college professors around the area saying, hey, I'd really like to do this. Mm-hmm. I really want to come in and speak to your class. And it's like a total free of charge sort of thing. Like, please let me just come in and just, speak to your college classes. And so I've gotten a few college professors to accept and gone in and started doing that. And I love it, actually. I didn't know this. I didn't realize this at the time. But, having been a teacher, an educator for the last 23 years, and apparently being a lifelong learner, as well as apparently I'm approachable, this has kind of given me a specific set of skills that allows me to be, apparently, I'm a pretty good public speaker.
Yeah.
From the feedback that I've gotten from people, they like it. So, if you're interested, you can go to my website. It's denithorne.com.
Denithorne.com. I will link it up too. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a few quotes up there from people that have seen me speak.
That's amazing. One of the words that gets used on the show a lot is multi-passionate, which just means someone that has a hard time figuring the one thing they want to be when they grow up. They kind of a Renaissance soul. And so I kind of see you in that vein. I mean, math and fashion to me is those are two big, those are different worlds. And then,
What are you talking about? Fashion is such a mathematical equation. I've got it figured out.
I think maybe it is though, right? If you're pear-shaped, there's probably equations.
Probably out there. I don't know. I really don't. But,
I'll leave it to you to figure that one out.
Well, people, somebody in one of my speeches, they're like, oh my God, I love your hair. And I was like, oh, thanks. I really appreciate that. It's a wig. She was like, no. Oh my God, it's a wig? And so then the question became, how did you get such a great hairstyle for you? And I said, well, I am a mathematician. Mm-hmm. And they all looked at me like I was crazy. And I was like, problem solver? That's what I do as a mathematician. And so in many ways, there isn't a mathematical formula that I do know, but I understand this idea. Here's a problem. And so there's a solution for this problem. And in fashion, it's really interesting because I've, worked with many different people and they're like, I hate this or that, the other thing. And I'm like, well, why? And they're like, because my body. And I'm like, well, no. Don't start blaming your body on these things, because regardless of what body you have, there are clothes out there that will fit your body. Mm-hmm. It's just, you can't have this idea that says, I'm going to go to the store, I'm going to pick up a shirt that says size M, and I take it back and it has to fit. And if it doesn't fit, that means my body is broken.
Right.
No, it doesn't. It probably means that, you should just try a different shirt.
Right, exactly. Don't onboard the kind of baggage that comes with feeling like your body isn't working. Yeah,
right. Totally that so many people totally go to that. They totally go to that idea. So in many ways, being a mathematician has helped me in being trans and finding my fashion. And just it's kind of made me a problem solver and to approach things from that perspective. That It's just a problem, and it just needs a solution. And sometimes it may take a few more experiments, to find that solution. But always be willing to go ahead and to experiment to find the solution, because it's out there.
It is. I love that so much. That's good stuff right there, Kelly. Like the whole idea too, that like you remain curious and like open to whatever that answer might be. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be the 1 + 1 = 2. It could be something very different.
I tried so many different iterations of things. Like, it's hilarious. I had this thing on my blog about how to create cleavage.
Yeah.
And so during my speech, I put up a picture that I have where I have amazing décolletage. And people are like, oh my God, the hormones did such great work for you. And I was like, yeah, that's probably about 2 or 3 years before I changed my hormones. They're like, what are you talking about? How could you have that picture, but you hadn't changed your hormones? Like, somebody said to me, they're like, you've definitely had a boob job, right? I'm like, no, I haven't. But it was just that same idea, experimenting until I found something that worked. And so, yeah, it was amazing.
I will link up to that blog post because I saw that as I was going through, and I was like, well, there you go. Those are things I don't know. Oh, goodness. Well, I feel like we could go on and on forever, but I am.
Well, yeah.
So maybe another time, but.
I love to talk. If you haven't realized that, I'd love to talk.
Me too. What a match.
Yeah. I will gladly go ahead and come back, on your program anytime that you will go ahead and have me, because, I'm not sure if we actually told like kind of a story in this, or if we just sort of had a good time.
Before we get to a last couple of questions.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. If somebody either would like to find your blog or they would like to, I know you already mentioned your site. What kind of advocacy or speaking work are you looking for? Or is there something?
Oh, I'll speak anywhere. I really will. If you call me and I'm available and I can put you in on my calendar, I'll do it. Awesome. I'll speak. I'm totally willing to do that and come, for just about anything to help support the trans community, because I'm so grateful to the people that came before me that did a lot of hard work that has made it so that my transition has been as easy as it has been. And so in many ways I want to be able to try to give back to humanity in any way that I can, by trying to help be an educator, which is what I am at heart.
Yeah. So they can find you at denithorne.com or Unordinary Style, the blog.
Yeah, Unordinary Style. Yeah.
I will.
Yeah, so it's also funny because I use 2 different names, right? So like I have my name, Kelly Denithorne, but my blog was started when I wasn't using Kelly Denithorne. I had my pseudonym, which is Nadine Spirit. Yes. So you can find me online as Nadine Spirit.
How did you pick Nadine Spirit? Did that mean something to you?
Well, I probably went through about 5 or 6 different names. And I liked some and I didn't like others. And my only requirement at that time when I chose Nadine was I was using when I was born, the name that was given to me was Robert. But then most of the time I went by Bob. And so I didn't want to have a name that was like Betty or Brooke or whatever. So it couldn't be like Bob. No. Now I'm Bobby. No. Right. I didn't want that. I wanted something completely different. So I just randomly chose Nadine. And I think it was for Google, for Blogger or something like that. I forget exactly what it was. But I needed a last name. And so then I was trying like every single name that I could possibly go ahead and think of. And Google was like, nope, that's taken. Nope, that's taken. Nope, that's taken. And so I, unfortunately for me, I am a cigarette smoker. And so the cigarettes that I smoke are American Spirits. And so,
that's so great.
Yeah. So I looked down at the cigarette box and I was like, okay, here, how about Nadine Spirit? And Google's like, yep, you can do that. I'm like, okay, there you go. Done. So now people look at it. They're like, oh, what is it? Like Nadine, like your spirit, like this is your spirit animal. I'm like, no.
Cigarettes.
Yep, cigarettes.
That's so great. Yeah, my earlier blog's name was Welcoming Spirit. So,
interesting.
But it was the other kind. It was not cigarettes. So,
okay.
Yeah, that's back where it all started.
Funny.
Yeah. Well, okay. So let's get into the last couple questions.
Sure.
What has the Crossroads of Joy and Purpose looked like for you?
So the crossroads of living my purpose and my joy look like for me, apparently that's being an educator. Yeah, so I really just find, such immense joy in educating people. And I can't believe how joyous it is to me to be able to try to help educate people about what it is to be transgender. That is, I love educating. I love being a math teacher, but being able to educate people about being transgender, I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. This isn't even work. This is just fun.
I love that so much.
Yeah.
I can tell it just lights you up. That's so good. Yeah. And then last and most joyfully, what are 3 ways that you can think of to jumpstart joy in your life, in the world, or in other people's lives?
I say the first thing would be learn to accept who you are and then learn how to work with it.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a difficult thing. So a lot of people learn to accept yourself. Well, yeah, but see, maybe what you're accepting is that you're not necessarily a great person, but you need to accept who you are before you can actually change who you are. In my mind. So accept who you are and then learn to work with it. So then, secondly, I would say share your story. Everybody has a story, and in coming out to people as trans, I've been shocked at the stories that people have been told me. Like one of the very first people that I came out to, a couple that I came out to, it was probably a day or two later, they called me up. They're like, "You're amazing. We love you." And I'm like, why? And they're like, well, because you had the courage to come out to us. And because of that, my husband had the courage to come out to me and tell me that he is actually bisexual.
Wow.
Yeah. And they've been together for probably 10, 15 years.
Amazing.
And the gentleman in the relationship had never actually had a heterosexual relationship before. He had only ever had homosexual relationships prior to her.
Oh, wow.
But he was so terrified that to let anybody know that he never told her.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And the courage it takes
yeah.
to step into that being, of speaking your truth in that way is amazing.
Yeah. So, and I've had story after story after story like that. And so, share your story because I'm sure that it's amazing. And so then last thing I would say would be always be humble enough to learn.
That's beautiful.
Oh, thanks. I try to be well educated, but I also try to be willing. I will defend my position very much so until somebody is able to educate me otherwise. But once somebody is able to educate me otherwise, then I'm willing to change my opinion on a dime.
I love that, Kelly. Thank you so much. Those are all so great.
Oh, you're so cool.
And thank you so much for being on the show with me.
Oh, I so appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Kelly, thank you so much for being on the show. It is such a treat to have gotten to catch up with you again. And I'm just so delighted to see how you're owning your human experience and really becoming an advocate for transgendered people. And thank you so much for sharing your story with us this week. If you guys want to find out more about Kelly, you can find the show notes for this episode at jumpstartyourjoy.com/Kelly. And while you're there, of course, you can sign up for the 3 Things Thursday newsletter. And of course, there's another 203 joy-filled episodes there on the site too that you could discover and binge listen to. If you're really excited about it, I would love to have you come on over. Next week on the show, we're going to revisit the discussion about how to start a business when you have a 9-to-5 job. This is something that I lived through and did in the last year. I left my 9-to-5 job in January of 2019, and so I'm going to dish the dirt on how I did that, how I built this business of podcasting and being a podcast consultant, while also still working a 9-to-5. And I can't wait to share that with you guys, and I hope you'll come back for that. Until then, I hope that your days are filled with so much joy.